Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi emphasizes urgent need to halt military actions. The Iranian president warns Israel of a strong military response. And France says a planned UN conference on the two-state solution has been postponed. The news in detail. Egypt President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has emphasized the urgent need to halt military actions. That came during his call with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, where the two leaders called for the return to negotiations between the US and Iran, facilitated by Oman, as it's the only path to a peaceful resolution. They discussed the escalating Israeli situation and its potential catastrophic consequences for regional security and stability. President Sisi also highlighted the importance of a comprehensive approach to nuclear non-proliferation in the region. Sami Shaban, the head of the Nuclear and Radiological Regulatory Authority, confirmed that Egypt is entirely free from any potential radiation leaks that could occur due to military operations in the region. Shaban added that radiation monitoring devices in Egypt have been operating 24/7 for many years. He pointed out that much of the information circulating on social media is inaccurate and unscientific. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has issued a warning to Israel, saying any repeat attack will be met with a stronger military response. President Pezeshkian stated that Iranian forces intercepted Israeli equipment designed to evade radar detection. He warned that without Iran's current defense capabilities, Israel would carry out daily strikes against Iranian territories. The remarks follow heightened tensions after recent Israeli attacks, which Iran says will not go unanswered. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israeli warplanes may soon fly over Tehran, claiming recent strikes have set Iran's nuclear program back by years. In a recorded statement, Netanyahu said Israel dealt a powerful blow to Iran's nuclear capabilities and warned that further heavier strikes are coming. He stressed Israel will not allow Iran to acquire nuclear weapons and will act with full force if necessary. The Israeli military spokesperson has stated that they are currently conducting attacks on several sites in Iran, with fighter jets flying over Tehran for over 2 hours. He declared that Tehran is no longer fortified and emphasized their strong strike against Iran's nuclear program, targeting buildings and laboratories involved in uranium enrichment. The spokesperson affirmed their commitment to take necessary actions to prevent Iranian threats.
אתמול נהרגו 3 אזרחים ונפצעו 76 אזרחים בפגיעות טילים איראניים.
Social media videos have shown dark smoke rising from an automotive factory in western Iran, reportedly struck by an Israeli attack. The factory's location in Bourjerd, through matching trees and flag poles seen in satellite imagery. Iranian media also reported strikes on a garrison in Kermanshah and the Bourjerd factory. This escalation follows Israel's extensive air offensive aimed at halting Iran's nuclear ambitions. The UN Secretary General has urged Iran to exercise restraint as tensions with Israel escalate, stressing the need to avoid further conflict. UN spokeswoman Stephanie Temberley Antonio Guterres contacted Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi to press for calm and prevent further escalation. Guterres condemned all military actions and called for diplomacy to resolve regional security threats. He is expected to hold talks with global leaders in the coming days in search of peaceful solutions.
And as you can imagine, the Secretary General continues to follow with deep concern everything that is happening there.
Israel's military has released footage claiming to show strikes on Iranian targets after its largest air offensive aimed at halting Iran's alleged nuclear ambitions. The Israeli military posted the surveillance video on Telegram saying its air force continues to strike threats inside Iran. The move follows a wave of Israeli attacks which Tehran countered by launching hundreds of ballistic missiles. Israeli health officials say Iran's latest attack killed 3 people and injured more than 170 as tensions escalate across the region. Iran's Revolutionary Guard claimed responsibility for Operation True Promise 3, saying over 150 Israeli sites were hit. The operation used drones that reportedly breached Israeli air defenses. Senior Iranian commanders now threaten to escalate further, vowing to strike U.S. bases and unleash a barrage 20 times larger in future attacks on Israel. Also, the Iranian army's air defense shot down an Israeli F-35 fighter jet that intruded into its airspace over western Iran. Reports indicate that the pilot ejected but remains unaccounted for. Iran's army says it has hit multiple targets inside Israeli-occupied territories using Arash suicide drones following Israeli strikes on Iran. Iranian forces confirmed drone attacks on Israeli positions, while Israeli media reported a 5th wave of Iranian missile strikes hitting areas in Tiberias, the occupied Golan, and Lower Galilee. The escalation comes after Israeli airstrikes on Iranian cities, including Tehran, where senior military officials were reportedly assassinated. Air traffic has sharply declined over Iran and Israel following Israeli strikes on key military and nuclear sites in Iran. Flight tracker data shows aircraft rerouting around Iranian airspace after Israel launched targeted strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, missile factories, and military leaders. The operation is part of Israel's push to stop Iran's alleged atomic weapons program. Flight radars 24 also showed reduced activities over Israeli airspace amid fears of further escalation. Iran is calling on the United Nations to take immediate action after what it calls Israeli acts of war violating its sovereignty. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi told UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres that Israel's strikes hit both military and civilian sites. He invoked Iran's right to self-defense under international laws. Guterres condemned the attacks and pledged efforts to de-escalate the growing conflict.
اینکه جمهوری اسلامی ایران با تمام قوا پشت سر مقاومت همچنان خواهد ایستاد و هیچ کس نباید تردیدی در این خصوص به خودش راه بده. ما پشتیبان مقاومت بودیم، هستیم و خواهیم.
Iran's UN ambassador has labeled Israel's recent attacks as a declaration of war and called for international action. Saeed Ervani told the UN Security Council that Israel were acts of terrorism targeting Iran's sovereignty, including peaceful nuclear sites. He invoked Article 51 of the UN Charter, affirming Iran's right to self-defense. Ervani warned that any Iranian response will be lawful and proportionate and urged the Council to prevent further aggression.
Responsibility for the consequences. Supporting Israel today is supporting war crimes, crimes against humanity.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has informed Russian President Vladimir Putin that Israel's aggression against Iran will elicit a fitting response. During the call, Putin condemned the Israeli strikes, expressing condolences for the loss of civilian nuclear scientists and military officials. He labeled the attack as a violation of international law and offered to mediate to reduce tensions. Pezeshkian thanked Putin for his support and highlighted Israel's ongoing attempts to escalate regional conflicts. Iran's supreme leader has vowed serious consequences after Israeli strikes, warning Tel Aviv it has made a grave mistake. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei declared that Israel will face decisive retaliation with no mercy, saying its future will be dire. He emphasized national unity behind Iran's armed forces and vowed a significant response to what he called Zionist aggression. Khamenei said Iran will prevail in its confrontation with Israel. Iran says 60 people, including 20 children, were killed in an Israeli strike on Tehran. Iranian state TV aired footage of a destroyed residential complex in the capital, reporting heavy civilian casualties. The attack comes amid a wave of missile exchanges between Israel and Iran. Israeli forces claim they struck over 150 sites across Iran, targeting key military and nuclear personnel in their largest offensive to date. The Non-Proliferation Treaty is a landmark global pact aimed at preventing the spread of nuclear weapons and promoting peaceful use of nuclear energy. And from Iran to Gaza, where the death toll has surpassed 55,000 since the war began in October. Health officials report hundreds more killed or injured in recent Israeli attacks. Gaza's health authorities say 55,297 Palestinians have been killed and 128,426 injured since the war broke out on October 7th, 2023. In the past 48 hours, alone 90 people were killed and 605 injured in Israeli strikes. Since March 18, the conflict has claimed over 5,000 lives. Medical teams also reported receiving 274 bodies and more than 2,500 injured from areas near aid distribution centers in southern Gaza. Thousands marched through Madrid on Saturday, demanding an end to the war in Gaza. Protesters condemned what they called a genocide and urged EU action. Demonstrators filled central Madrid chanting, "This is not a war, it's a genocide," and held signs reading, "Gaza resists and the world awakens." Activist Diego López Garrido and said Spain is leading calls to end the bloodshed and called for firmer EU pressure. The protests also honored journalists killed in Gaza. Similar rallies are expected today in Barcelona and other Spanish cities. Thousands marched in Paris demanding an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and full access for humanitarian aid as the war continues between Israel and Hamas. The protest was organized by French labor unions and left-wing parties in solidarity with Palestinians. Demonstrators called for an end to the war in Gaza and the urgent delivery of humanitarian aid. The rally reflects growing public pressure in Europe over the ongoing conflict and civilian suffering in the Gaza Strip. France says a planned UN conference on the two-state solution has been postponed. President Emmanuel Macron announced the delay of next week's high-level United Nations talks on Israeli-Palestinian two-state solution, citing rising regional tensions. Despite the postponement, Macron reaffirmed France's commitment to eventually recognizing a Palestinian state and supporting a broader movement for peace, while also affirming Israel's right to defend itself.
J'ai dit ma détermination à reconnaître l'État de Palestine. Elle est entière et c'est une décision.
Iraq has officially reopened Al-Qaim border crossing with Syria, resuming trade and travel. The Iraqi Border Ports Authority confirmed that the first Syrian truck passed through after inspection, marking a key move towards boosting economic ties. The reopening is expected to enhance cooperation between the two countries and facilitate commercial and civilian movement after years of disruption. Lebanon says its airspace will remain open, reversing earlier reports of plant closure. Public Works Minister Fayez Rosmani confirmed that airspace will stay open, with Middle East airlines increasing flights to make up for earlier delays. This statement comes hours after officials said Lebanese airspace would shut down amid regional instability. Authorities are closely monitoring the situation to ensure safety. Pentagon officials have stated that the events organized by President Donald Trump's administration to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the U.S. Army have been met with resistance, as they consider these events to be attempts to politicize the military and exploit it for partisan purposes. According to officials in statements to the Washington Post, the partisan display has caused disappointment and concern among U.S. military leaders. According to the Army's field manual, soldiers are taught that the Army as an institution must remain neutral. Activists protested against President Donald Trump near his Mar-a-Lago residence as part of a nationwide protests against the Trump administration as Trump oversees a historic military parade on the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary. The protests, if they go as planned, would represent one of the biggest public displays of opposition to Trump since he returned to power in January. The protests were scheduled to coincide with the parade, which will showcase tanks and military gear over the streets of Washington, D.C. Trump's 79th birthday is also on Saturday. North Korea's leader has called for increased shell production during a visit to military factories. Kim Jong-un inspected defense facilities, urging expanded output of artillery shells suited for modern warfare. His push aligns with efforts to bolster military strength and deepen ties with Russia. Meanwhile, Pyongyang has remained notably silent on South Korea, where a new liberal president recently took office. India is inspecting Boeing 787 aircraft after a recent Air India crash raised safety concerns. The Directorate General of Civil Aviation has begun checks on 8 of 34 Boeing 787 Dreamliners in India. The order covers all Air India's 787-8 and 787-9 jets fitted with GEnx engines by General Electric. Authorities are reviewing maintenance procedures as part of precautionary measures following the incident. Britain's King Charles and senior royal honoured victims of the Air India crash during a military parade. Wearing black armbands, King Charles and royal family members paid tribute to the 279 victims of the crash, including 39 on the ground. Only one person survived the disaster, which saw the aircraft collides with a medical college hostel near Ahmedabad during decent condolences continue to pour in globally.
Not yet.
Big shoes to fill. Robert Voss.
Britain's tech minister is warning of job losses if workers fail to adapt to AI technology. Minister Peter Kyle has urged employees and companies to swiftly engage with artificial intelligence tools. He pointed to a generational divide, with over 55s using AI at half the rate of younger workers. Kyle stressed that just 2.5 hours of training could help close the gap and safeguard jobs in an evolving tech landscape. The Philippines and Japan conducted a joint maritime exercise today in a region of the South China Sea. The exercise, known as Cooperative Maritime Activity, aims, according to the Philippine military, to enhance international cooperation to achieve a free and open Indo-Pacific region. That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here is what we've been covering. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi emphasizes urgent need to halt military actions. The Iranian president warns Israel of a strong military response. And France says a planned UN conference on the two-state solution has been postponed. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Q News on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNews EGY to stay informed. Many thanks for watching.